It's, well, yeah, it's true. I've come home from days and my wife's like, how's your day? I hear it.
There you go.
There's one day
You're good, Mayor.
I was doing CPR on the guy. This was months ago.
Welcome, everyone, to North Ogden City Council. Meeting will now come to order. Please mute your cell phones so we don't have any disturbances during the meeting. Thank you for your attendance this evening. We'll begin with an invocation and pledge allegiance by Council Member Stoker.
I can see that.
Father in heaven, we're glad to be here this night and to discuss the things that are on the agenda. We're grateful for this area in which we live in and the nice weather that we've had these last few days and been able to enjoy. We're grateful for the freedoms that we have and the blessings that come our way from living in this country and under the flag. Pray now that as we discuss these things that we be able to do so and come to decisions that are good for the city and the community and do so in a civil manner. And we ask thee that thou will bless those who have cause to mourn or have trials or things that have happened in their lives, that they will know that people think of them and care. I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our meeting now is open for public comment.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all the citizens of North Ogden for their engagement in our past election cycle and for the opportunity I had to run for that office. Even though I didn't make it, it's great because we still have a city council. It's not like the world has fallen apart, and great things are happening for me. So I just wanted to thank all the citizens for their support and their engagement. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. See no other comments, we'll begin the agenda. Number 2, canvass of election results. Our presenter will be Annette Spenlove, our city recorder and director.
Okay, let me hand these out. You are the Board of Canvassers.
Thank you, Annette.
Votes on this also.
Can we put that on a business card? Board of Canvassers. Yeah, it does.
All right, let's go to the first page. It is the statistics of registered voters. The total voters was 10,146. Ballots cast, the total was 5,444. Voter turnout total was 53.66%. We were the second highest in the county. That's the highest North Ogden's ever had in a turnout. So on the 2-year term for the mayor position, Neil Berube has 3,050 votes. That's 56.81% of the votes. Lynn Satterthwaite had 2,319. That's 43.19%. 100% of those votes were counted, and there were total votes cast for the 2-year mayor position, 5,369. For the 2-year, well, let's go for the 4-year council seat. Our 3 council members, the total Votes were Ryan Barker, 2,965 for 20.22%. Charlotte Ekstrom, 2,689 for 18.34%. Philip D. Swanson, 2,540, 17.32%. Randy Wynn, 2,521, 17.19%. Julie Anderson, 23 for 16.53%. Ron Flam, 1,524 for 10.39%. Total votes cast, 14,662. 100% of those were all included in that. So for our 2-year council seat, Cheryl Stoker, 2,871, 54.24%. Wade Carl Bigler, 2,422, 45.76%. So our mayor-elect will be S. Neil Berube. Our three council-elect will be Ryan Barker, Charlotte Ekstrom, Philip D. Swanson, and for our 2-year 1 council seat, Cheryl Stoker. Turn to the next page. Election day voters, there were 255. By mail early provisional, 5,189. So most of our citizens are voting by mail. Total was 5,444, that's 53.7%. By mail ballot summary, ballots mailed 10,146, ballots returned and counted 5,189, ballots returned undeliverable 130, ballots not counted 56. This is the reason those ballots were not counted. 6 of them are returned past the deadline, 18 of them were returned unsigned, 1 had no ID verification, and 31 signatures did not match the voter record, for a total of 56 ballots that were not counted. Each voter whose ballot was not counted was notified of the reason their ballot was not counted and given instructions on how to correct the deficiency. The provisional ballot summary, provisional ballots cast, 13. Provisional ballots not counted, 0. They were all counted. With that being said, the 4-year council race is within the margin for a recount, and that is determined by the difference between the number of votes cast for a winning candidate in the race is equal to or less than 0.25% of the total number of votes cast for all candidates in the race. That candidate may file a request for a recount, and that has to happen within 7 days of the canvass, so by 5 p.m. on November 26th. What happens during that recount, if we have a recount, they re-examine all disqualified ballots. This would be envelopes that were unsigned, had signatures that did not match, or were postmarked later than the 4th of November. They'll go through all those again. Then they'll rescan all the ballots, that would be about 42,000 ballots, and will take about 2 days to scan. They'll re-upload all the results from the scanner at Weber County's polling place. And they have requested, as you all know, March 3rd is our new primary election date. That was changed last legislature. So the county would really like this, if this person wants a recount, for them to decide quickly. And they have to provide that information to me, file their request for a recount with me. Anyway, the county would really like that done fast, because then they have to clean out all their stuff for our elections that we just had and get ready for March 3rd elections. So that's where it stands now. So right now, I need a motion for you to accept the canvass as it is right now. If we do have a recount, you will do a new recanvass. So as of now, I need you to accept the canvas as you've seen it.
I move that we accept the results of the 2019 municipal general election canvass.
A move by Councilman Severine that we approve the results of the 2019 municipal general election canvass.
Second.
A second by Councilwoman Stoker.
And you vote. So everybody votes by roll call. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question real quick? If they do they want a recount, and we have to do a,
Recanvass?
do another canvas,
Yes.
we only have one meeting in December, we'd probably have to have another.
Well, you'll have to have a special meeting
We'd
to
have to
get
have a
that
special
done.
meeting to do that, so, okay. Thank you.
Okay, beginning the vote with Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilman Severine,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson. Yes. Councilman Stoker.
Yes.
I vote yes.
I have a
Motion
form
passes.
that each one of you have to sign your name, by your name, and just pass it down. Thank you.
Item number 3, discussion or action to consider a resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule for aquatic center fees. Our presenter will be Tiffany Staley, Parks and Recreation Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this past April, before the Aquatic Center opened, the City Council started the process of adjusting the Aquatic Center fees, which have not been adjusted since 2012. At that time, we adjusted the Aquatic Center fees for admission for things that would go into effect in May and June of that year. We chose to hold off on adjustment of fees for season passes, facility rentals, and swimming lessons because the pool is seasonal and not on our fiscal year. Those had already been for sale that current year. So now that we have closed out the 2019 year, we are ready to start sales for those items for the 2020 year. And so that is why those adjustments are here before you. On season passes, they've increased, the price proposed here is an increase of $5 per pass. And then on facility rentals, it's an increase of $5 per hour per 200 people. So for a 2-hour reservation for 200 people, it's a $10 increase. For a 3-hour reservation for 200 people, it's a $15 increase from where it was before. And then on swimming lessons, with some phone calls to other agencies and other places who teach swimming lessons around the area, their going rate for swimming lessons is usually between $35 and $40. And we have no issue filling our swimming lesson classes. We feel like $40 is an appropriate range, and our distance between our resident and non-resident fees in the past has been $15. So that would put those lessons at $40 and $55. And then the last change is for Bowery rentals during open swim hours. This is about a 2-hour Bowery reservation, and that increased $5 from $35 to $40.
Any questions for Tiffany?
Did we talk about adjusting the season passes too? Was that-
Yes, so they are increased.
Okay, that's okay.
Yep, they're at the very first, $5.
Thank you.
So Tiffany, it says as we continue to work towards recovering our costs with revenues, how much closer are we getting to this, getting to be self-sufficient?
We were at almost 80% of operational costs until a couple of years ago, and we increased lifeguard wages and wages for our swim instructors. So I haven't looked at that comparison for operational since
Okay.
that point.
I was just curious. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, it's been brought up about Groupon. Do we know does Groupon give you data where people are coming from?
Yes.
Because the reason I ask, my wife and her friends, when they go to the pool, they go to Groupon.
Okay.
And so I know a lot of North Ogden residents are going on Groupon. So it seems like we're raising the rates, but we're just skirting around it and getting the Groupon rates. Is it even?
So I think it is, and there are a couple different reasons. We could have an entirely separate discussion on Groupon, but they've got some algorithms that are pretty specific. They can limit how many purchases you're able to make. So yes, people in North Ogden are able to purchase that same discount, but there's a limit on how many you can purchase. So it's not like someone could visit the pool 20 times in a summer and use a Groupon each one of those 20 times. It is limited, but their outreach was what was huge for us, because the first time we looked at their radius map of places, we were reaching down into Salt Lake, past Clearfield, Roy, out west, up north. So we felt like it was worth it.
If you're getting that data, that's great.
Do we know whether people are coming from that distance to be able to make up that difference in price? I mean,
Whether they used a person from Salt Lake used theirs. It does tell me how many people used theirs total, how many were left unused, but it doesn't give me specifics on the location of who used theirs.
Oh, interesting.
Other questions from the council?
Tiffany, since we raised the rates for the lifeguards and that, how much have they come back? Have we retained them? Because that was,
Well, I wish I could tell you that admission was only tied to the rates, but it's also tied to weather. And this year we had a really crummy June that was really cold and rainy and wet.
So I think she was asking about lifeguards coming
lifeguards.
back.
Oh,
they're coming.
yes, the lifeguards
'Cause
have.
that was the purpose we
yes.
raised their wages, so we wouldn't keep training new ones every year.
Yes, so this past year we only hired about 15 new, which was the most returning guards I have ever had in a season. So it cut down on training time, and it was just nice to have an actual staff that was there that knew what they were doing. So that was very effective, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? I would entertain a motion then that we consider a resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule for aquatic center fees.
What's the resolution number?
09-2019.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve Resolution 09-2019, approving the amendment of the consolidated fee schedule for the Aquatic Center.
It's been moved by Councilman Swanson that we approve the resolution amending the consolidated fee schedule for the Aquatic Center, number 09-2019.
Second.
The second by Councilman Turner. Begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severie,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item, discussion or action to consider an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance for Patriot Point to MPC.
Number 4.
Number 4, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I
don't wanna
checked it
talk
off too
about
quick. Discussion or action to consider an ordinance amending the general plan's moderate income housing. Our presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney.
So, council, I know two of you attended some of these general plan steering committee meetings to discuss this amendment. That was the main purpose of reconvening the committee. Some new members were added for that, for this discussion. But this is something that the state is now asking that all the cities do, which is reevaluate their moderate income housing plan every 2 years. It used to just be a requirement that it be included in the general plan. They've now added the additional, I don't want to say it's a diehard requirement, but they have tied some transportation funds to biannual reporting or semi-annual. I always get those two mixed up. Anyways, every other year we have to report on the moderate income housing plan and do an update. The purpose of this document, as presented to the council, as recommended by the General Plan Steering Committee as well as the Planning Commission, is to kind of establish a baseline for the city to start measuring moderate income housing. And we've been asked to measure it in 3 different levels. The first level, well, let me explain what moderate income housing is. So they define moderate income housing as housing expenses by a person who makes 80% or less of the average median income for a family. So in our city, the average medium area income is $78,962 per family. So someone who makes, or a family that makes 80% of that is $63,000 and some change. The 50% margin is right about $40,000 at $39,500. And then the 30% are people who make about $24,700. And the way that it's spelled out in the federal standards as well as the state standards for measuring is people are allowed to spend up to 30% of their income, their monthly income on housing costs. So that's insurance, utilities, and mortgage or rent. And the purpose of this document is to look at kind of where the city's at. At least that's the beginning part of the document, is where the city's at, where not necessarily where we've been, but then the second part of the document is where we're going and maybe some goals that the city might have. It was brought up during the Planning Commission by one of the members of the community who was there that this document is not intended to say the city has these goals, we have to meet it, we're encouraging low-income housing, or we're doing anything. Really, the document and the updates are designed to measure where we're at and where we're going. And so it's kind of I don't want to say it's a kumbaya kind of a document, but there's no punishment for not following or meeting the goals. There's not any real specific goals identified. We have identified a number of the additional units the city might need in the coming 5 years, but there's no specific hard requirement to meet that goal. Right now, I think the state is focused on two things. One, they're focused on the Salt Lake and Utah County areas more than Davis and Weber, although Davis is probably number 3 on the list of counties they're focused on. And two, they're focused on tracking the information. So they're reaching out to the cities to compile the information, get it back to the state, and then essentially be able to evaluate how the state in general is doing on moderate income housing. I think if you look on page 1 of this document, you can see there's a table that summarizes some of those numbers I just went over, but it also shows what that 30% monthly income rent or mortgage type payment would be. Understand that includes insurance, taxes, and utility bills. But someone whose house payment and mortgage, insurance, and all that together combined is $1,578. If they make less than that $63,000, they would be considered house burdened, or house. Burdened is the official term to use. And you can see it goes down. So it's kind of a sliding scale. The less you make, the less, in theory, you can afford to pay. And that just kind of establishes the benchmarks. As you go through the document, there's actually the American Community Survey that's done by the folks who do the census study. They provide a lot of information. They look at these 80, 50, and 30% numbers, and they actually have identified in our city, up at the top here, how many households we have in each of those ranges. And they even split it up by those who are homeowners and those who are renters. Understand that it doesn't specify a lot of much more information. Someone who's in the 50% to 30% of the AMI could be someone who's just starting their career, or it could be someone who's on a fixed income that's retired. And so it might be someone who's living in their parents' basement, or it could be someone who has their house paid off. I mean, there's not a lot of direct correlation between each of these numbers. It's kind of meant to be a broad look at how the city's doing in general. But it is specific to our jurisdiction, our municipality. There's maybe before I go any further, are there questions about the document, or at least the data gathering portion of the document? Okay. So there again, just this these tables are just kind of designed to provide some information. You can see this second table on this page. It breaks it down into people in various income levels and those who would be considered housed under some sort of a housing burden. The people who make more than $70,000, who are kind of up in that normal above the median income housing range, that the reports don't really focus on, but they still give us the data for. It's really these individuals who are making less than $75,000, and in particular those towards the lower end of the scale, that we start having to really focus on how many people are able to afford to live in the city in those income ranges. Let's see, it also gives us there's more tables that are about kind of this same thing, and we can go through them if you want to. The second half of the document is focused on ways that the city can maybe encourage or maybe help to either keep the moderate income housing units we have or help develop new ones. As said earlier, the city isn't focusing on pushing low-income housing or anything like that, or even right now the city doesn't subsidize any sort of a project in a way to help moderate income housing be generated. Essentially what we've done in the past is pretty much let people build the type of units they want to build and sell them for what they want to sell them for. In general, that was the recommendation that came from the General Plan Steering Committee, which was we don't want the city in the business of setting rent prices or house prices or anything like that. But the goals that they did identify, which are shown down in the last several pages of the document, focus on ways that the city can help maybe make the type of projects that could be developed that might be closer to that moderate income housing range, how to make those, make it easier to develop those. And maybe easier is even the wrong way, or the wrong way to describe it, but at least remove some of the regulatory barriers if there's a developer or someone who wants to do that type of a project, kind of a starter home type of a project, for example. What we have found, at least in our experience in the city, is most developers are typically focused on getting the maximum price for the homes they sell. Some of those fall in the moderate income housing range. Think of some of the townhome projects, and some of them don't come close. Think of some of the subdivisions that have been developed further up on the hill, where the lot cost is quite often so expensive that they have to put a larger house on it because the house to lot value would be upside down if someone built too cheap of a house up there. So I think the general feeling of this document is the city is always going to have a wide variety of housing, and the ways to keep encouraging that wide variety for the different income levels. The city set a few goals, or the General Plan Steering Committee has recommended a few goals be adopted as part of this document. The first one the city has already done, which is allowing accessory dwelling units in our residential zones. We haven't had a lot of people utilize that. We've had a few come and ask about it and a few start projects. That's essentially a mother-in-law apartment is oftentimes what they're referred to. Our ordinance requires that the owner continue to live on the property in either the main unit or the mother-in-law apartment, to help just kind of keep the neighborhood feel and keep a strong attachment to the property, so we don't end up with absentee landlords. The next one is focusing on if there is going to be higher density units, that those oftentimes end up being more moderate income range units, and that those be focused around the transit corridors. Places where if people are in a one-car family, or maybe even sometimes a no-car family, they can afford to have a place to live and have close access to bus routes, or that's all we have in the city currently is bus routes. The next the next goal that was recommended by the committee was implementing zoning incentives for moderate to low income housing units, and particularly to help preserve the existing ones. There again, this isn't intended to be a list that the city has to follow these kind of ideas, but maybe some options to explore for the council and the planning commission as they look at, are there ways to help, encourage this type of housing? From what we've seen, there hasn't been a huge dire need for. We're not like Holiday, for example, where the people are buying 4 houses and tearing them down and building 1 house, because the land values in Holiday, for example, a lot is worth $500,000, and 4 really old houses are worth less than a vacant lot is. So there's a lot of people who have done things like that. We haven't ended up in that situation yet, and I don't think any time in the near future we will. There are the thing I forgot to mention is all of these. There's a list of A through M that the state gave us in the statute that says these are some of the things that you should adopt or add to your plan for a city of our size without any fixed rail type corridors. Thinking of light rail or front runner. We only have to adopt 4 of them into our plan, and I think we recommended 7 of them in total. It just as options for the city to consider as we move forward. So the next one is this ways to preserve the subsidized and moderate income units on a long-term basis. We've talked about some ideas for doing that, but there again, there's not a set plan for this one. It's just something that the Planning Commission and the General Planning Committee felt it was appropriate to explore. The next one, O, is implementing a mortgage assistance program for city employees or people that provide services to the city. A good example might be the fire district. That was something the General Plan Committee thought was interesting and thought it might be worth exploring. That this might be something in the range of a down payment assistance program or something like that, that could be tied to the number of years that employees worked for the city, if they're moving into the city. There again, this is a program they recommend it be explored, not that there was a set out plan, the city should do this or that. Oftentimes, particularly in the case of police officers, they don't often live in the jurisdiction they serve, just because of, they don't typically like being called to their neighbor's house to deal with a weed abatement issue or something like that. So, the other kind of weed. Sorry. I guess neither of them, right? They don't want to be called for either. Anyways, so there might be some other type of things, that we look at. And then the last one is kind of a catch-all. There were several items in that menu that they said partner with an outside agency or work with an outside group who provides this sort of thing. And the General Plan Committee felt it was appropriate to try and establish some of those contacts, see what's out there, see who we can partner with. Several members of the community who attended the General Plan Committees mentioned experiences they had, or even, I think there was some who were on the boards of some of these groups, like the Weber Housing Authority and things like that. And so there's some connections that we can make or have made to help promote this kind of thing. And the way the whole ordinance or the whole statute is kind of designed is to try and help everyone recognize that it's a statewide issue. It's something that we all need to focus on together. I think my reference to the counties they're focusing on the most, which is Davis and Utah County, that's where the housing prices and land prices are the highest. For example, if you want to buy an acre of ground in Eagle Mountain or Saratoga Springs, you're in the $150,000, $160,000 range. In North Ogden, we're still right around 100, so a little lower or a little higher depending on the type of ground and how easy it is to develop. But they also have the highest investment in the transportation corridors with the fixed rail and the front runner. And so the focus on this was, I think, to kind of help encourage those communities to really take a look at their housing stock, and even if there's not much they can do, at least be aware of the problem and start looking for solutions. So the committee that put this together, they put in a lot of hours. The mayor and I helped and participated, but the majority of the work on the goals and things was done by the committee members. Staff is the one who did most of the data collection, analyzing the ACS, the American Community Survey Program. We had a few members of the committee who really stepped up. One in particular, Stephanie Casey, is the one who did all the graphic layout work for the document, went through and completely rebuilt the tables from scratch to make them look better than what they look like in a Word document. And so it's been kind of, it was nice to have those type of skills in the community. There were several other members on the committee who haven't ever been on city committees before and had some amazing contributions. I think the mayor and I, quite often in the past probably 3 months have stated how amazing that committee functioned. Even when people had differing views and opinions on things, they talked it out, and it was kind of fun to participate and just watch them work through it. Plus, we had one of our new committee members brought cookies and treats quite often, so that was a good selection as well. As far as staff is concerned, this document is a policy type document. It's tied to the general plan, which is why the general plan steering committee originated it. The planning commission reviewed it and recommended it for approval as well as, and so it's been proposed to the council for adoption. The state does want us to send in a report that we have adopted something by December 1st. So I apologize that we didn't give you an extra meeting if you wanted more time to talk about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have, or, I think the mayor can ask for a motion or whatever the council feels is appropriate. And several of those committee members are here if you have questions. Julie and Stephanie were both on it, as well as Councilman Severing, Councilman Swanson. I'm trying to think if I think that's it as far as folks. If you have questions for the committee members, or they might even have a comment they'd like to share, because I'm sure I forgot something that I should have passed on information-wise.
John, I wondered if you
Councilman
would, oh, sorry, girl.
No, you start to go. You go, girl. Go.
I was just going to say, would you maybe elaborate for the citizens? At the beginning of this discussion, you talked about how that they're tied to this from the state are consequences with like traffic. Can you just clarify that so that becomes more understandable to the citizens?
So it's transportation funds. They typically call them transportation impact funds. The majority of that money goes to UTA for bus rapid transit, hard rail type projects or fixed rail. But the city has received some of that money, particularly in our sidewalk programs. It hasn't been a lot, but it's made a difference, particularly as we've been looking to try and get sidewalks in as we get to schools and back. But if something like this wasn't adopted, the city wouldn't lose out on a ton of money. The flip side to that is there's no penalty if we don't meet any of these goals. And so the recommendation from the beginning has been, let's do a good faith effort at putting something together, getting the information, adopting it, and then doing our part, particularly because oftentimes what happens in the other jurisdictions in the state ends up coming up here. And, sometimes as we all do, rules are made by anecdote. There was a rule passed recently where a city went out and told a 12-year-old person they couldn't sell fruit off their tree on the street corner, or they couldn't have a lemonade stand, and that turned into a state law that said cities can't regulate businesses by anybody under the age of 16 unless they make more than $500 a year. And so sometimes it's better to the League of Cities and Towns has asked us to participate in this program, so that they can go back to the legislature and say, listen, we're doing what you asked, stop asking for more. So I don't know how realistic it is that we won't be asked for more, but that's the intent, is to try and do our part. And
Early part of that discussion, they were going to hold major transportation funds, and that was kind of cooled down by some of the other legislatures. But it could have been more severe than this, but it's been kind of softened a little bit at the present
We
time.
face that potential of more ramifications without a moderate income housing position.
And in fact, what the mayor's talking about is the B and C road funds, and we get about $500,000 a year in B and C road funds. So that was the initial kind of, this will be the stick looming over everyone's head, and they scaled it back to say, let's just have it be these other funds. So.
The time will tell. Councilman Turner?
So just a comment on this. This is an ordinance, but the way I like it, the way it was worded, which you did a really good job with how you guys worded this as a committee, is it's like a living, breathing document. It's not that we're locked in because the way it's worded that the city wishes to explore options. It's not like we have to do these certain things. And so I thought that was very well written, and the strategy there was very well done, because I know we're doing this to satisfy the state, but I thought it was very well written that way. So
Thank you.
I liked it. I like the way it's written. I like the way it handles what the state's requiring, and I think it's a good ordinance. So
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
that's all right.
Well done. I mean, it's great. Love your graphics, by the way. Made it I'm a picture book kind of guy, and it made it a lot easier. I really appreciate what you did. In Goal J, one of the potential things is to add additional housing types. What kinds of types of housing, other than high-rise housing, which I don't see ever happening here, what are other types of housing? I'm scratching my brain on that one.
So I think that was intended to refer to the presentation that our planner Brandon Bell put together on just housing types, that was kind of focused on sometimes when we think of, and I'm going to use the duplexes. Oftentimes there are duplexes that don't look like duplexes and still give the feel of a single family residential. And so and I think that's kind of what it's intended to look at is there something other than apartments and single family home? Is there something else that can kind of work? But there again, it's non-specific enough that the council and the planning commission can add that definition as we move forward.
Is that the thought you had?
That's why I like.
Yeah.
Presentation was fantastic and just showed a lot of options that would give different housing, at different income levels that would fit really well in our community without being, the apartments that people freak out about. There's a lot of options.
We actually have those kind of duplexes. She could put people on.
And so Julie was one of the committee members.
I just wanted to share we actually have those kind of duplex homes. I went to deliver to somebody's home, and she gave me her address, and it was a cul-de-sac, and I went around and around like, this house is not here. And it was actually a duplex home, but it looked like a house. And so it didn't interfere with the neighborhood at all. And so that was kind of what we talked about is so we don't infringe upon other people, why do we have to have 3-story apartments? There has to be some other ones that we can put in specific areas and stuff like that. And I do have to say, on the road money, I spent 8.5 hours listening to every hearing that was done on that last year on SB 34 and talked to the senator. And B and C roads were actually never included in that. Where they became included is when they transferred it from the Senate to the House, because the Senate had asked for an additional $25,000, I think it was, a huge amount of money anyway, with no justification for it, for the TIF money. And so the House, of course, immediately put the skids on, said, you want that much money? Then we're going to touch the B&C roads. And so it ended up being that the senator pulled it back and said, okay, we'll just go with this. And so they scaled it back to almost nothing by the time the Senate hearings and the House hearings were over and done with. But just so you know, it has been an interim, and they're asking for a lot more money. They haven't put any specifics on it yet, and I have been in touch with the senator saying, please don't, because you should not be regulating the city on how they build and what they build and when they build it and how we pay for it. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thanks, Julie.
Any other questions from the council? Yes.
I just have a comment. I still don't, I think this is a great document, but I still don't understand the reasoning. If you build a nice product, it's all built off supply and demand. Right now, there's a demand for houses, and they cost a lot. I'm not going to tell a developer to build cheap houses so that we can make moderate income housing. And it seems like they're trying to penalize us areas that have nice housing areas and trying to make them so that there's a reason we live in North Ogden and not Ogden. I guess I'll say it that way.
Yeah, we don't disagree with what you're saying. It's just a matter
that's
to try and comply, and we'll send this in and meet our requirement.
And also, I like let's give the people that work for our city a benefit for living here. Because looking at this, most of our city's employees are in the 50 to 80% range of the median. So I like that.
Any other questions or concerns?
I like the fact that they talked about that they're looking at other options, because we have places in our city where there's land, but it doesn't fit with, a bigger home or that, but you can put a smaller home in as a starter, not a starter home, but a nicer home, and it fits in with the general plan, and it does help moderate high density and that's so and it says where it applied. I like that, where it fit. So it's a good job. Well done.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to consider the ordinance amending the general plan moderate income housing.
The ordinance number?
2019-25.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we consider the ordinance amending the general plan for moderate income, and the ordinance number is 2019-25, has been discussed.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Stoker to consider the ordinance amending the general plan's moderate income housing. It's been seconded by Councilman Swanson. Any other discussion or question? If not, we'll begin the voting with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker?
Yes.
Councilman Severie?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now moving on to discussion and our action to consider an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance for Patriot Point to MPC. Our presenter will be Brandon Bell, our associate planner.
Rob Scott's actually going to be presenting tonight. He's on his way in.
Oh, here he comes.
At the last minute. Would it be okay, John, if I sat down over here?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of puny. We have a pointer. You got the latest diagram, right? Yeah, why don't we just call that out?
Did today. Down here.
Okay, Mayor, City Council, audience. This project is a rezone request as identified by the mayor, at approximately 200 east, 2550 north. There's just under 33 acres in this. Can we blow it up just a little bit? So there are 6 phases that are included within this project. 150 East runs north and south through the project. The Montessori School is in the northeast corner, and the Ranches project that you're familiar with is on the east. On the west, we have a boundary here with Harrisville. This area is comprised of townhomes and apartments. And then we have a vacant parcel that's here down here in the southwest corner, and also just to the south, there's a vacant strip there as well. So I'll be describing in detail some of the various aspects of each one of these phases. First of all, to remember, this is a legislative action, and when the legislative actions require that the Planning Commission give a recommendation to the City Council, and that's what is before you tonight, is a summary of their considerations and their recommendation regarding this legislative action. So the City Council has a lot of discretion when it comes to making decisions regarding legislative matters, and in fact, the MPC zone, which is being requested, has a lot of flexibility as it relates to the criteria that you'll be considering. Remember that typically the criteria for making a decision regarding the legislative matters require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. So by way of background, this project stretches back quite a ways, clear back in April of this year, when there was a joint work session between the Planning Commission and the City Council. On page 2 of the staff report, there's a summary of the issues that the Commission and the Council identified for the developer to address as part of the review of this project. So I'll just give a couple of examples, but there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There were 8 items that were requested that be addressed, and I think you can, staff can safely say that they have addressed these items. So in terms of the MPC zone, you recall that the MPC zone was to be a interim zoning measure to address having some flexibility in design in anticipation of further ordinance work being done. And as such, we've gone through a number of these types of projects. You recognize that there's an awful lot that goes on with these projects. There's lots of standards, lots of requirements, and so the individuals who are involved in putting these together, it constitutes a significant amount of work in order to be able to provide a complete application. One of the key components of the MPC zone is it not only requires an ordinance be adopted, but it also requires a development agreement. The development agreement is not ready for your consideration this evening. We wanted to review with you the overall project, the project design, the Planning Commission recommendation, and to determine if you are satisfied with the conditions that they have identified in their recommendation, and then based on that, then the final development agreement would be coming back to you in a future meeting. Any questions about that? Okay. So the project itself, it's a mixed-use project, residential and commercial. They've identified 6 phases of the project. Those, of course, are subject to change. The applicant has prepared site plans, project narrative, building elevations, and that surround the future. You can see Pond Park that you all have spent many hours on and deliberating about. So potentially this property has a built-in amenity that is going to be a nice feature for the future residents that will be staying here. living here. The residential component has 3 housing types: townhomes, twin homes, and apartments. And the commercial development will be in a future phase, I think it's phase 6, if I remember right. 5. Along 2550, and there'll be some commercial up there. There's a couple acres of commercial that will be in the future offing. The project summary on page 3 shows the numbers of apartment types. The number of housing types. There'll be 144 apartments on 6 buildings. There'll be 197 townhomes and 39 buildings, twin homes. There are 48 units, and so it says 50 buildings, but I think that's probably not right. So it's probably 24 buildings. The total unit center, 389 units. Yes, sir.
I know I'm interrupting you for a sec, but we're not voting on that. We're just voting on the MPC zone, right?
Correct.
Because that could change, and then that will have to come back to the Planning Commission and to us to approve what the actual buildings will be, correct?
So as part of what you're approving, you're going to be giving us direction to include these specific numbers in the development agreement. So they will be in there.
Okay.
Okay. Identified in here along Brandon. I should give Brandon the credit for pulling this together. We collaborated, but he's the primary author on this project. So the master plan community zone has a density range of 6 to 18 units, and that is actually consistent with our general plan designation of medium density for this area. The overall density is right pretty much in the middle. It's just under 12 units per acre. Also, we've given a little description relative to the park and the upcoming designs that will be forthcoming relative to that. We're recommending that the zoning for the pond/park area remained RE20. We've been working with the Planning Commission. We'll be recommending that we create an institutional zone for all city-owned properties. And so that'll be forthcoming, and that would be considered at that time. Next, in terms of the amenities, we have an exhibit that they have provided for you that we'll be talking about a little bit more. But the applicant has identified various amenities, including a clubhouse. There was some discussion about as to whether or not the Ranches project, which is the same owner as this project, would be sharing some amenities, and we'll ask John or whoever to maybe elaborate on that a little bit more as to whether or not that's actually going to happen or not. So in our MPC zone, there's quite a number of standards that are included within this report that we've given an analysis and that the Planning Commission reviewed. The first one has to do with building placement and massing. And so, John, if we could go to the actual site plan. And I think on the first page it actually has an insert showing the cross-section for 150 East. 150 East goes north and south, and then there's a couple other small stub streets that are public streets. The remainder of everything is either a private drive. There we go. Staff has worked on this with our Parks and Recreation and our Public Works Department, and this is the cross-section that we're recommending. It would have a 6-foot sidewalk on the east, which is consistent with the trails that are being recommended for this area. It includes bike lanes. It includes parking on, I think it's one side of the street only. And it also provides for 11-foot travel lanes in each direction. So one of the things that we've been doing as these streetscapes have been identified is that we have been recommending that those be adopted as part of our public works standards. So John will have to include that as part of what we end up with in the final document or in a subsequent document.
And council, one thing, this is still a standard 66-foot wide road or right-of-way. The difference is that we've essentially, or that staff is recommending a little bit less asphalt, I think 2 or 3 feet less asphalt than normal in favor of wider sidewalks and wider park strips, which is the grass between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk. So it's not a big change, but that's part of the reasoning behind this cross-section.
Let's see. I'm going to cover some of this other information. We have a discussion about maybe you could go to the south east corner of the project where it shows how it borders. You go down to, I'm not sure which.
I think the next page.
And just slide to the right.
You want me to rotate it so north is up?
That'd be good. So we want to be on the other, we want to go to the east.
Oh, southeast, not southwest?
Right.
Okay.
So what you're seeing there on the south, on this border along here, and maybe you can just kind of scroll up just a hair, is you'll see that these are the existing ranches buildings that are located here. And you'll see that there's some very minimal setbacks along this east boundary line with these units. However, they're on the west side of the ranches project, there are substantial setbacks. When you conclude the two together, there's between 30 to 40 feet of setback between those units. The Planning Commission, when they considered this, felt that that was sufficient to be able to provide an effective buffer there. The other thing that we talked about, and looking at this design, the Planning Commission spent a considerable amount of time, they even went on a field trip to look at other projects in the area to determine if some of the circumstances surrounding this project would be something they'd be satisfied with. As I indicated in the beginning, we have, except for the southwest corner and the south, we have existing projects that surround this property. And so when you're starting to do, I wouldn't consider this an infill by any means, but it does have some constraints relative to the fact that these other land uses that are there and having to be able to accommodate an effective design, provide continuity and connectivity for this, it presented some unique challenges for the designers. So the project itself, as you can see, and I can't remember what the name of this street is. This is a public street that comes in from the ranches right here, but you'll notice that those two units actually front onto the street, whereas the majority of the rest of the units, they actually have private lanes or private drives where the people will access, but the fronts actually look into courtyards. So given the fact that if you have a blank canvas, you're able to do some things maybe a little differently. When you have this kind of a circumstance, it requires that there has to be some creativity in the way that those are. So it's basically these two sets of units, if I remember right, that actually front onto a street. Everything else is on these private, it's called private street on the plat, but it's private lane, whatever you would like to call those things. So that was part of the design considerations. Because of those discussions, the Planning Commission decided to go on a separate field trip, and that's why they ended up doing what they did relative to that. Okay. We'll talk about some setbacks, I think, in a little bit later down the way here. Building heights. We have a standard on page 4. It gives you the requirements for building heights. There's one exception that looks like needs to be made with respect to the twin homes. Their maximum allowed is 24 feet, and some of the twin homes may get up to 25 feet. So Planning Commission did not have a problem with that. That'll be included in the development agreement. We have some setback issues that I just described relative to the design on the properties that are immediately adjacent to the ranches. Those are supposed to have additional setbacks, but because of the separation there at the ranches, the Planning Commission also felt satisfied with those setbacks. The next one is the architectural design materials. I think we have a color board for the townhomes on Exhibit J. I don't know if we can go to that. There we are. So pretty much a combination of browns and reds and so forth and tan colors. So those are the colors that they're suggesting. Those those colors can be finalized as part of the site plan review process. Also, they have provided building elevations. As requested, they've eliminated any stucco from the project itself as requested. And we have some updated elevations that are in Exhibit E. So you see a combination of designs that relate to all three of the housing types: the apartments, the twin homes, and townhomes. As far as signage is concerned, they haven't proposed any signage at this point. In the past, for these kinds of projects, that's normally been delegated to staff to review. In terms of open space, the numbers that we have now, there's a minimum of 20%, and they easily exceed that. Those numbers should actually go up because we've been working with them on revising some of their parking numbers, which I'm going to cover in just a minute. So they're going to be reducing the amount of parking. They actually had more parking than is required in our ordinance. So by the elimination of some parking, they should be able to provide some additional green space. They've given us a conceptual landscape plan. That finalized landscape plan will come as part of the site plan review. We have standards on outdoor lighting. That's also something that normally is reviewed as part of the building permit, so that meets our identification of a dark sky. The lighting focuses down and not extends up in the air. Bottom of page 5, streets and pedestrian ways. Kind of covered this with showing that diagram. It's a 66-foot right-of-way on 150 East. The idea was that this was to be a boulevard look and that it would have an opportunity to have some pedestrian feel to it in combination with the traffic movement as a facility there. Let's see. I think I covered those things. City Council, that's been presented to you tonight. Also, in our staff report, it talks about the site plan shows basic roadway access and sidewalks for the pedestrian ways, and there's a sentence in there about the Parks and Recreation specifications. I just want to modify that. The trail around the park and the 6-foot sidewalk meets the park's requirement from their analysis. Let's see, other forms of transportation, coordination on alternative traffic opportunities should be explored. That's something, as far as the bus lanes and bus routes and what have you, that's something that we'll want something from UTA relative to that. Then the big one is talking about parking, and so maybe we can blow that up. So the required parking is 2 stalls per unit. And we have, as far as the townhomes actually provide 2 per unit with some visitor parking. So the new number for that is, instead of 469, it's 462. The required is 394, so there's 68 stalls above what's required. So they've reduced that by 7. They went from 469 to 462. Staff has not had an opportunity to look at the design of the visitor parking in relation to this, so we'll be working with the applicant to identify where that visitor parking is and see if that number is one that we're all satisfied with. As far as twin homes, no change there. 2-car garages. The apartments are required to have 288 stalls, and they're showing 319. So that they reduced it by 70, but it still has a fair number more than is required. So again, we'll be looking at the overall design as far as their visitor parking. I think it's a good idea to have visitor parking. Just haven't had a chance to actually look at the location of that. Commercial parking, we're fine with that. So in the report, it talks about that they'll be giving us revised numbers, which they've given us. And so we'll be modifying this report to reflect those finalized numbers. In terms of environmental, the standard relates to building landscape and solar design. The question there is if the City Council has any items. The Planning Commission did not necessarily identify any that they felt needed to be addressed, but if you have some, then that should be considered this evening. Requirements unique to residential uses. This is a summary at the bottom of page 6, top of page 7, that relate to the design and building pitches and et cetera. The Planning Commission, they were satisfied with, as I indicated before, that the building garages loading onto the private lanes would be all right based on the circumstance of the property and its layout. The applicant has also stated the pitch for the townhomes and apartments is either 412 or even greater, depending on the actual design. So in the report, we had this paragraph that talks about design considerations. And these are the ones where we talked about the garages facing onto the public streets. We talked about the relationship to the adjoining properties and what have you. As the Planning Commission went back and forth on that, they felt like it was reasonable for the design that they've identified. Last but not least, we have the opportunity, if there are conflicting provisions with our code, then as part of your final review and approval, you can modify those standards. There's 2 that we've talked about. One is the building height, the 1 foot height issue, and also the building setbacks on those adjoining properties. And the Planning Commission felt like that those could be both satisfied with the existing design. So on page 8, there's quite a quite a list of considerations for you to take a look at. Does the application meet the purpose and intent of the MPC zone? Does the proposal meet our ordinance standards? Is the overall layout acceptable? Are the building elevations, building materials, and colors acceptable? Does the city council agree to leave the RE20 zone in place for the park designated property or for the park detention property? Are the proposed amenities for the project acceptable? Is the 150 East streetscape acceptable? Are there any modifications that should be included in the development agreement? Does the city council have any other items they want the applicant to address? So that's a long list. And then along with that, the Planning Commission gave some 13 recommendations here. So let me go through these. You can see that most of these have been completed. Maybe we could go to the design of just above the pond, John. Next, we want to go to the next one that actually shows that relationship. So what you can see, this is 150 East going north. The pond is down in this area here. Initially, these buildings were oriented this way. We have a standard that says you have to have 50% frontage buildings that front on these buildings. So they've aligned these buildings along 150 East. So that's what that is talking about. So they have done that. As far as providing the missing setback distances for various buildings, they've given us that. They've completed an exhibit showing setbacks for all buildings to property lines. Townhomes that are adjacent to other zones must have a 24-foot setback or attain a modification. The Planning Commission is recommending that be granted. Show the required 20-foot garage setbacks on the plan. That's completed. Specify the building heights for the townhomes. Completed. Submit a detailed landscape plan with the site plan application. I think that's forthcoming, isn't it? Have they actually given us the detailed landscape plan? I thought that was still forthcoming. It's still forthcoming. Okay, so that one needs to be modified just a little bit. So that one's forthcoming. They also, because of this, the reorientation of these property lines, a subdivision plat will need to be processed. So that needs to be done. Leave the park detention RE20 zone in place. Remove the fence along the west side of the Ranches project to enable the Patriot Point residents to access the clubhouse. So John or someone will need to talk about that. I think that's still the plan so that the residents are not prohibited from being able to associate with their neighbors. Include in the landscape plan the details for the playground and the dog park. Coordinate UTA regarding public transportation amenities, and then the determinations that the city council needs to make. What should the townhouse setbacks be at the property boundaries? Is the design configuration with the townhomes facing the exterior of the property acceptable? Is the 150 East design cross-section design acceptable? Are the garages loading onto the private lane acceptable? Planning Commission has reviewed the application. They are recommending to the City Council rezone the property with the conditions listed above. And the Planning Commission found that the application is consistent with the general plan. You can also find that. Again, staff will prepare a development agreement in accordance with the direction provided by the City Council. I know that's a long, long report, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. The applicant is here to answer questions as well.
Council, questions on?
I'm curious, what is the commercial going to be? Thank you, John.
The commercial
commercial on 2550 is designed to have 2 either retail outlets or offices. There'll be 2 buildings there, and there'll be 8,000 square feet that could be subdivided or not subdivided, could be divided into approximately 1,200 square foot units. So depending on what happens to your pond across the street and what kind of new commercial interest we have there, we'll just let that direct it. We're not prepared right now to go that far with start building up there. We'll let that come, but there'll be nice looking buildings. So I think there's a picture of them there.
Thank you.
John, come back, please. This is kind of, it's a related question. Over at Legacy North, what's the distance between some of those buildings back to
12
back?
feet.
12 feet?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just trying to picture that in consideration of that one boundary that was being shown, that
What
the
we
ranches
did
have
is-
a significant
yeah.
distance. This would not.
We were worried about the boundary on the west side, and so we took the planning commission down and showed them what Crockett and Kohler had built down there at Mountain View Landing, and showed them the actual distance from the front door to the property line, and they were all satisfied. There was enough room, they felt comfortable with that 20-foot setback there.
Yes.
Rob, this one's for you.
Yes, sir.
On the streetscape design, are we looking at the traditional curb and gutter, or are we looking at that free-flowing, more water retaining that we've been talking about moving towards?
It'll be our standard curb and gutter at this point. If, as part of the finalized design for the storm drainage and what have you, if they get looking into it and find that maybe some bioswales or other things are appropriate, then those certainly could be incorporated.
Okay, thanks.
John, what is it zoned for down there as far as commercial? It's that we had zoned for acceptable zoning,
So
2550?
on 2550, the property directly across well, let me pull up a map. It'll be easier than me trying to give you a mental picture. Okay. So the property that you can see, sorry, it zoomed in a little too fast. This property that's in this lighter color, where it's just had the hay cut, that is currently zoned as the C2 or the CP2, which are both commercial zones. The property over here to the west of it, the top 2 acres here has been rezoned to a commercial zone. The bottom acreage, as well as our piece here, are still RE20 zone. The neighbors here in these, they're about 1 acre pieces, and they're in the RE20 zone. And so if you were to line those up, the office space that's being talked about is right here in this area of the project. If that can you see where I'm pointing at? So essentially right now, this is all zoned RE20. We anticipate these properties to all be commercial in the next year or so, particularly with the sale of the city property.
I know when we had that analysis, person came and broke it down as to what would generate the most revenue or sales tax to the city. Refresh my memory on how office space buildings mixed in, or how that compared to retail.
So if my memory serves, the highest sales tax generator was commercial, particularly retail. He had recommended small commercial pads. The next highest there was as far as total tax dollars, and I'm talking sales tax and property tax, was actually the multifamily units, because they generate quite a bit of property tax, not any sales tax. And then office was the lowest generator of the two. And I think that's, you know, a good example. If I remember him right, saying he talked about flex space, you know, having something that could be an office or could be retail is actually having that ability to convert it back and forth as the market demands. Most landlords prefer retail because it often makes more than office does. And so if the economy or the area will sustain retail, then they'll put retail in, but the market kind of controls that.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion from the council?
I want to hear what John has to say.
About what?
He said he had a comment.
John. Hey,
You
Mr.
got halfway
Hanson.
up there, John.
Mr. Hanson.
I just wanted to tell the council how excited we are about this project and all the heartache that went into the pond and the hard decisions you made. But we're really excited. The landowner, Mr. Opikins, is here. And one of the things that he said when we started working with him is that he did not want to maximize the property. We have an agreement with the city of 19 units per acre. He wanted to leave something for the city that would be lasting and everyone would be proud of in 15 years after I'm dead and Orloff's dead. It would still be a good project. So I just wanted to say that, and the partners we have with Crock and Kohler, they have just done an outstanding job on the ranches, Mountain View. They just finished the orchards in Roy. This is their expertise in building these type of units, and I'm just excited to be a part of it. The real reason I came up was that the streetscape, we've just turned that over to the city and to Rob and Brandon. We'll put in whatever the streetscape committee comes up with. We're not fighting anything on 150 East there. That's whatever the city would like. So questions, but we have a proven product. We have proven builders. We're well financed. Our first phase would be 58 townhomes adjacent to the ranches, and which would be just south of your pond. So that's where we would start the property and where phase one is. Then we'd see how that goes, and Mr. Opikins would then say, okay, let's try phase two. And so we want to do it in an orderly manner so that we're fulfilling the need of the market. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you for your comment.
Mayor, can I add? So what Mr. Hanson referenced was the agreement for the sale of the property was 20 units to the acre was the density. That would put this at about 640 units on these 32 acres. What they're asking for is the 389. So it is quite a bit less. If this was adopted and the development agreement approved, that would supplant the other agreement for density, and this would become the new number that was written in stone, the 389. So
That's 11 units, right?
that's about, it's somewhere between 11 and 12 units to the acre. Yeah.
Yes.
John, going back to the agreement you just referenced, in that agreement, it was the 20 units to an acre in the R4 zoning, correct?
Yes.
And
And the ranches, which is the property just west, was designed under the R4
was
zoning.
designed.
Or east, just
The
to the
difference
east.
for council being that under the MPC, it involves a development agreement, where
Yes.
R4 would not.
Right,
correct?
correct.
Councilman Barker?
In my short time up here, I actually am not a big fan of the MPC zone, mainly because of our other project, and I don't know if you guys are gonna sell your project to another developer like somebody else did, and then they come back asking for different concessions. And I imagine you're probably gonna do it yourself, but I have complete faith in our staff. My problem with the MPC zone is it comes up here to council. We're not developers, we're not planners, our staff knows more than we do. So that's why I like the, whether you leave it an R4 or do MPC with staff, and because I've learned not every development is designed and planned and drawn correctly the first time. When you get to phase 2, it might change a little bit, but then you'll have to come back. And you'll be right here in front of us all again. No? You're gonna do it perfect the first time? Okay. Yeah.
I was initially involved in I know which project you're talking about, in the development on 1700 there with, I won't say his name. You know, I understand your feelings. I had the same feelings as I went through to help them. But this isn't anything like that. We're funded. That's a big difference. So I don't see us
It's not that I'm
back.
against it, I know projects change, and
Yeah.
it changes all the time, and it's not public, and it's fine, because it's not changing. I mean, it's changing, but it's done the right way.
We want to do it the
Right.
most painless way. We hope we've done it right the first time.
Okay.
So I just wanted,
yeah.
I understand your frustration. I've been there with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor, just to give you a little update, as you know, you've approved in the budget an opportunity for us to revise our land development code. And that's definitely one of the things we've put on our list, is to take a hard look at the MPC zone and see the pros and cons of it, see what tweaks or replace it. Or we're not quite sure where we want to go with it, but at least something similar, hopefully better.
Councilman Walker, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you right. So you would prefer the R4 zone over the MPC, so that when there are changes, it doesn't have to come back to council?
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
I don't see a benefit in why to bring it to council. Why not leave it with staff, and that they know the zones a lot better than I do.
So the R4 zone would be your preference, is that what
It'd be my preference, but if they're asking for the MPC, I think it'd be easier for them if it was the R4 zone. But-
Oh, it certainly would be. I was thinking of the other development that was mentioned. If we did the R4 zone, they could use stucco if they wanted to. They could use vinyl siding if they wanted to.
Well-
Whatever colors they wanted to, we would lose that. And I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I'm just trying to clarify.
John has.
So, council, one thing that we could do is we could set a parameter on, as long as it's not a change over this level, the planning commission would approve it, or the staff would approve it. So it doesn't have to come back here. It would go through the normal process. A good example is if they're not changing the number of units being added and the landscape is still the same, then they could shuffle some things around with planning commission or staff approval. I think staff would probably, because of the level of the project, mostly prefer that be deferred to the planning commission. But in some cases, staff, like the signs, staff can approve the sign designs, because both Brandon and Rob are sophisticated enough to know what a good sign looks like. So that might be a compromise, is instead of making every little tweak come back to the council and go through 3 meetings, to have it go to the planning commission and be vetted there, where they deal in these type of projects all day. Well, not all day, one day every other week, right?
Just to be clear, I'll do either zone. I'm just saying for ease, it's almost easier just to go to staff. But if you want MPC, let's, yeah.
I like what John said.
John, does that need to be included in any kind of, to be able to give the staff and planning commission the ability to be able to make decisions without it having to come back to the city council? Does that have to be including it in that ordinance, or is that just something that we just mutually decide right now?
We will put it in the development agreement. So to specify exactly everything, what I'll probably say is everything will be planning commission approval except for these things, like the sign will be approved by staff. And if there's a change of this, it has to come back to the council because it's just too big of a change for it to not be a council type decision.
Because I'd sure like to move toward kind of a status here in the city that we're very user-friendly rather than to have to always have things come to the city council. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in Brandon and Scott and the staff, and if we have the conditions as recommended by the planning commission, it really shouldn't have to come back to the city council unless it's something of, a serious issue.
Okay.
Counselor, are you ready to make a motion on this?
Is it it's an ordinance, is that correct?
So the ordinance actually requires the development agreement to be approved at the same time.
Okay.
But
so
I think it would be appropriate for the council to say, do a motion that we move forward with the development agreement. Here's the things where we might have tweaks to what we've seen, and those would probably be the two things most helpful for staff moving forward. And I think it would probably be helpful for the applicant as well to know what the council's general feel about the project is in some sort of a official action.
I don't have any tweaks. Do you have any tweaks?
Other than what we just discussed about.
About approvals?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Orliff's going to live longer than 15 to 20 years. That would be my only tweak.
We just said you were really awesome.
No, he didn't. He works for the wrong company.
No, I like it. No.
So I'll make a motion then, that
We have an ordinance number?
So we'll do the ordinance next time.
Just
Okay.
what's that?
Nothing.
I'll make a motion then that we approve the rezone of the MPC with the caveat that in the development agreement, we have the language that puts most of the small decisions, the non-critical decisions. I don't know what words to give to what you said earlier, John. Like amount of parking, or a change in an increase in the number of buildings, or an increase in the number of units. Anything like that, I think ought to come back to council. But a lot of the other stuff, most of the other stuff, I agree with my fellow council members, ought to stay with planning commission or staff. So that's my motion. You got it all?
Okay, we've had a motion by Councilman Swanson, as he described it.
No, repeat it, Mayor.
And
Can I just ask for a clarification? You're supporting the planning commission's recommendation
Yes.
as part of that? Thank
Yes.
you.
and do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Councilman Turner. Begin the voting with Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Severie.
Let me just kind of preface my vote by saying, I know this is just an amendment, but because of past experience of being challenged to my opportunity to be able to vote, again, this is not my development. This is not my company's development, nor is this my family's development. So I do not have to recuse myself again, even though it's just an amendment for the zoning ordinance. So my vote is yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Motion to excuse Carl.
Mayor?
We ready to motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Mayor,
Go on.
Mayor, I need to leave for another meeting, so I just, before I leave, I just want to thank all those who ran for election, those who got voted in, and I wish them the best of luck, and I'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Item 6, Public Works Site Petition to Annex Property Located at 165 East Lowman View Drive. Presenter is Annette Spenlove, City Recorder and Director, HR Director.
Mayor and council, it's about time this is almost done. It's the Public Works site, and you have received an application on October 1st, 2019, petitioning for annexation of 6.046 acres located at 165 East Lowman View Drive in North Ogden. This is the site that our Public Works facility sits on. The annexation process requires the City Council to accept the petition, which you did on October 8th, 2019. The Weber County Surveyor has reviewed the annexation plat map and approved it on October 1st, 2019. The property is within the North Ogden City Annexation Declaration Policy. The petitioner, which is North Ogden City, is requesting the zoning to stay as is RE20, which the Planning Commission has recommended on October 16th. The Utah State Code requires that the city give notice of an annexation for 3 consecutive weeks in the newspaper of local circulation, and that has been done. I certified the annexation, that it met all the requirements on October 16th. A public hearing is required and was noticed on November 10th and 17th, and you'll have that public hearing tonight. And written protests to the annexation were to be filed no later than November 18th, and we received no protests. And so tonight, this is for your consideration. There were some items that are little improvement. Those in our that deal with improvements in the city. Those superintendents of those, our water, sewer, our engineer, they had some questions and some concerns on a couple of things, and that was all taken care of in the technical review when all this was built. So all that's been taken care of. And so right now it's before you to consider an ordinance after you have the public hearing.
Okay, we'll have a public hearing on this particular item. Seeing none, we'll move on then.
Move to close the public hearing.
And move that we close the public hearing by Councilman Swanson,
Second.
and second by Councilwoman Stoker. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Annette, what's the ordinance number on that?
The ordinance number is 2019-26.
2019-26?
Yes.
Okay, we have a discussion or action to consider the ordinance annexing. Do we have a motion for that?
Yep. I move that we accept ordinance 2019-26, annexing the property located at 165 East Lowman View Drive.
Councilman Severin has made a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-26 to annex the property located at 165 East Lowman View Drive.
Second.
The second by Councilman Swanson. Begin the voting with Councilman Severin,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
I'll try and get this recorded this week.
Next item, discussion or action to consider members for the Public Safety Building Committee. As you know, we've initiated a feasibility study regarding the construction of a public safety building, and we've formed a committee. The names for this committee have been submitted to you as a council, and I can read them quickly if you'd like. If you need a copy, I have that as well. Dirk Quinney, Clark Crowther, Phil Swanson, Laura Barker, Karen McIntosh, Robert Bowler, Tim Scott, Jay Johnson, Chad Roylance, Brent Chug, Gary Stoker, and Kevin Burns, with Annette Spenlove as recorder and John Call as staff. Any questions on that? And do I have a motion to approve this committee?
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Was your intent to have Laura Barker as a voting member? Laura Barker? She's the
Court
clerk. And so for example, council, if the way it's written, Annette and I would be staff and everybody else would be a voting member, just want to make it clear to you and everyone that that's the way it would be set up. So just.
I think Dirk would like her voting member.
It's what?
Annette says that she believes the preference from the chief would be to have Laura as a voting member as well.
Okay. Any other questions?
So what do you need? Motion to what? Approve?
Motion to approve the Public Safety Building Committee.
I'll make a motion to approve the Public Building Committee, Police Building Committee.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Stoker to approve the committee. It's been seconded by Councilman Barker. Begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
You're gonna have to stay on now for longer than the end of the year.
Pardon?
You're on this committee longer than the end of the year.
Well, they can kick me off if they don't
No,
want me
we
on
just
there.
voted.
The mayor will also be included in this committee as we begin the meetings. The new mayor. Okay, number 8, discussion or action to consider a resolution amending the interlocal agreement for engineering services between North Ogden City and Pleasant View City. Presenter will be John Call.
So, council, we were, I think most of you were on the council when we added the city engineer, and we started out initially splitting our time with Pleasant View 50-50. We found that the engineer was working on our projects and our developments more than Pleasant View, so we upped it to 60-40. And we feel like we've actually reached that critical mass where it makes more sense for the engineer to be a full-time city employee. Pleasant View is okay with that approach. They have a contract attorney that they can rely on heavily as well, and have been doing so. And so their preference would be to just have us take over the contract. Essentially, the way this is written, it was supposed to expire July 1st of next year. This new amendment would actually have it expire December 31st of this year. There is a financial impact to the city. We would be coming back next meeting to ask for an amendment to the salary for that department, which is the Public Works Department. It's a general fund department for roughly $24,000 to $25,000 of additional salary expense for this. But we anticipate that with some of the larger projects that are coming online, the road widening, the detention basin moving project, that by having a full-time staffer who can go out and do the inspections, we can significantly cut down on the project management expense from an outside consulting attorney or engineer. So, anyways, we anticipate that the costs will show up in the salary line, but they'd be offset in the capital project part of the budget, particularly in the city's contribution to those projects. We do have the city engineer is here, as well as Dave, our public works director, is here if you have any questions for them. But we've been very happy with the work we've received, and we already have him in our offices with our vehicle, so there's not any additional expenses really other than the salary. But there will be an ongoing expense next budget year, because we wouldn't be splitting the salary at all. So we can anticipate another increase with the coming budget year as well. So.
Before we move forward.
Any questions, concerns? Discussion from the council?
Just adopted.
Do we have a resolution number?
Yes, it's A21, 2019.
And
First of all, the resolution's 10-2019. The agreement number is A21-2019.
And council, I amended the header to this resolution. So instead of a resolution adopting an amendment to the interlocal agreement, you're adopting an agreement which amends an interlocal agreement. So it's a nuance, but the recorder's office had asked that we tweak that language to make it clear that this doesn't replace the old agreement, it just amends the old agreement. Oh, and it shouldn't say, yeah. So the original agreement was A11 of 2019 because we passed it in July. And so this new agreement, which is A21, is amending that other agreement. It'll just help with record keeping, so.
So do we have two motions that need to be made then? One for a resolution, one for an agreement?
Make them all in one.
You can make it as one motion, so the resolution adopting agreement A21.
So there's not a resolution number?
So resolution 10,
10.
Okay.
2019.
10-2019.
All right, I'll give a stab at this. Oh, my goodness. Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 10-2019, adopting Agreement A21-2019 that amends Agreement A11-2019. Is that right?
Yep.
I'm going home.
Okay, we've had a motion by Councilman Swanson to consider a resolution amending the interlocal agreement for engineering. I won't go through all the
Repeat it, Mayor.
extra. Any questions, or, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, then we'll begin the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes,
Motion passes.
Did Councilman Severing second that?
we did.
No. He did.
I
Councilwoman
did.
Stoker.
Okay, what a mouthful. Meeting now is open for public comment.
Kevin Burns, 795 East, 1925 North. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the Public Safety Building Committee. I'm quite excited about that. It's been a long time coming, and I'm excited to have some input on helping those guys out and working on that. And the irony is not lost on me. So if anyone has any questions, you can follow up later, and I can explain it to you why it is kind of there's some laughter in the back of my head. So just thank you very much for that opportunity, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to share one thing with you from the medium income housing. I had the opportunity to look into helping with the mortgages for those who work for the city and stuff like that. And if you're interested, Ivory Homes actually has a plan that they presented this year to the legislation. They are actually covering the costs. It costs nothing to the state. But take a moment and look at that, because it really is kind of awesome. And it's something that maybe we can talk to our developers as we move forward in seeing what they can do. It's quite a detailed plan, and they provide these really nice medium income homes, plus a lot of little extras like grass money and washers and dryers. And in order to keep people who work for the city, they also opened it up to teachers and public servants in general. So I just wanted to share that with you if you want to take a moment, look at Ivory Homes, because it really is a great plan. It's a brand new plan this year that they put forward, and they're very open in sharing what information you need. Thanks.
Thank you for that information.
Hi, my name is Dave Shoup. I live at 3112 East, 4100 North in Liberty. It may surprise you that I'm at a North Ogden City Council, but I drive North Ogden Pass to and from work. I work at Coldwater Animal Hospital. Because I drive that pass, I pass through where they've done the construction there with the retention pond and then the new subdivision that's going in. And the road is a mess. If you've not driven it, I suggest you do. And not only do I drive that in my car, but when the weather is permitting, I ride my bike, and it's a danger to anybody who's a cyclist riding that road. Where they've tore it up, there's some significant dips and divots, and it makes me wonder, with the coming winter, what that's going to do. Maybe there's a resolution already in order to fix that when they're through constructing, but it seems like they're putting a lot of time and effort into the subdivision and nothing to repair the road that they've tore up. And I would applaud the city's intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll check into that. Appreciate your observation there. Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to the agenda. Council, mayor, staff comments. Councilman Severie?
I just wanted to mention for citizens who are not here but watching, I think there's kudos deserved to Dave Espinoza and also to Chief Quinney. Now you can pat him on the back. I'm not sure if everybody knows that North Ogden has recently been named the 7th safest place in Utah, up from 14 last year, so thank you. And then Dave Espinoza, I just have to say for Public Works, I know I talked to you earlier, Dave, but you know, your response to a citizen's concern about the dog park, awesome, man. Just incredible guy. We're grateful to have both of you here. I do want to just mention one thing, and I've had several citizens approach me about this. I'm just wondering now that elections are over, I've had a lot of citizens talk to me about the different Facebooks that have the North Ogden City name on it. Wonder if there's something we can do to be able to create just one Facebook with North Ogden City on it and see if we can eliminate confusion. Because with that kind of designation on them, I can see why citizens are saying, well, which one is the authentic, or are we getting correct information? What needs to be done to maybe legally make that?
So we can combine the police and the public works and the city page into one, if we'd like. The others that are controlled by outside groups, we don't have any say in them. We did request that Facebook require one of them to change their name a month or so ago, because it sounded like it was an official city page, and now they've added some stuff to make it clear that it's not, that it's run by an individual, not by a city.
So the name North Ogden City, we can't, what's the word, trademark it or really?
Yeah.
So somebody could create a Blake Severing Facebook that's not me.
Yes, it happens all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And
What's that, Kev? I have one. Oh, you have one for me? Oh, well, you're more handsome than I am, so leave it.
So the page, it specifically said North Ogden City, Utah, and we reached out to Facebook and said, hey, this page would cause some confusion, and so they reached out to the individual, and they added a name of who it was run by to the back that satisfied Facebook's terms, as far as clarifying that they're not a public entity. They're actually kind of aggressive on public entities because they want people to have access to government and to eliminate confusion. But we can also reach out to individuals and maybe work with them on maybe there's a better name that doesn't start North Ogden City. Maybe that it's at the end of the name or something. But we can't force them.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Councilman Barker?
Nope, nothing.
Councilman Swanson?
Just a request from staff for an upcoming discussion on the changes in recycling fees. Just for the public's awareness, we used to pay $36 a ton to dispose of recycling, and then they greatly reduced what can be recycled to basically nothing. And just in March, the cost per ton went to $50 and change per ton. And now, when is it, John? December 31st?
Evan could give you the better number.
November 1st.
November 1st, it went to 80 what?
83, 84.
83, yeah, it's right around $83 a ton. With probable increases to be seen in the future because of the way the recycling market's going. So for staff, if we could have a breakdown of what that cost is, I mean, it sounds like a lot, but we don't necessarily have a lot of tonnage of recycling that goes out. If we could have a breakdown of what that is per household per month, what that increase to the utility rate would be to cover that. And also if we could find out from Republic Services what the reduction in cost would be if we eliminated, don't kill me, I'm just getting numbers, if we eliminated the recycling program and had just garbage only. Because according to Recycled Earth, a huge percentage of what they do get in recycling ends up going off to the transfer station anyway, because it's not clean enough or it's not appropriate. It's not things that can be recycled. So I think we're at that point where we look at do we raise the rates to cover the cost, or is it better that we abandon the program and reduce rates accordingly? So if we can have those numbers when we have that discussion.
Could I add one other request while we're looking at those numbers? What it would be to have a green garbage can, green waste. If we're looking at removing recycling altogether, why not replace it with green waste in the summertime months? We've had residents ask. See what that'd cost.
We will bring back both those items with everything we can think of related to it, so you can discuss intensely.
Discussed it.
Okay, Councilwoman Stoker?
No.
Annette? John?
Just a request at the city party. If you haven't seen the email, it's December 10th. So mark your calendars. With that, if you have any pictures of city activities, I'd appreciate it. We like to put together a slideshow, and if you send them to me, then I can make sure they get into the slideshow. Maybe not all of them, but the favorite ones. We also, knock on wood, still haven't had any snow yet, but the Public Works Department and the Police Department have been heavily focusing this last week on putting out notices, letting people know if they're parked overnight, they're violating the ordinance. No tickets have been issued, it's just been warnings, but they've essentially almost cleared the streets, or at least significantly reduced the number of vehicles that are on the streets right now. That'll go through March, and it's just been fantastic to see those two work together. The Parks Department has finished the landscaping around the skate park, so if you have a chance, go up there and see it. It looks really good. It's been a long time coming, as well as they are going to get the walls put up at the new bathrooms over at Loman View Park, and the roof we're hoping will be on before the snow really flies. And then we can dry it in and get the rest of the stuff done over the winter under a covered roof, and it'll be up and ready to run and be open when the rest of the city bathrooms are open. I think that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I just remembered something. Can I quickly say? John?
You've had your turn.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Go
No,
ahead.
this one's important. When I first came in, Annette asked me about the Family Promise contract. But didn't you say we needed to discuss that and vote on that?
We did.
You did.
You missed it last week.
Oh, was that last? I thought you said it was going to be the 19th. Okay, I'm sorry.
So it was approved to be extended through July because that was the maximum extent. So it gives us some time to work out another agreement or a longer agreement, depending on what the council feels is appropriate.
I was really busy last week and wasn't able to attend, so I'm sorry that I was not here.
You needed a campaign break.
I just need the name of the person to send that to.
Okay, I'll get that to you tomorrow.
Chief Quinney? Okay. And Dave? No, sir. And Evan?
Just wanted to thank the council for their confidence in me.
Thank you. Thank you for all your good work. Appreciate it. Congratulations, and is in order as we had the election results, and we congratulate those who were elected to represent us in the coming 2 and 4 years. If nothing else, we'll have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made to adjourn and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.